Hey, this is Eric and Tammy over at TechnoRV, and because of our business TechnoRV, we're very fortunate to have access to a lot of experts in the industry as it relates to a lot of the products that we sell. And today we're fortunate to have Mike Conway from Southwire with us. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Eric. And Tammy. Thanks for having me.
So what we thought we would do is Southwire is the Surge Guard people here, and we personally have used the Surge Guard products for so many years on our RV. It is the product that we 100% believe in to protect our RV, and we just get a lot of questions about the units and just about RV electricity in general. So we thought we would just take this time with Mike and just have a discussion about many topics that we have that get brought up to us. So where do we want to start?
Well, let's start at the very basic level here. We get questions from new RVers that are 30 amp versus 50 amp. Which one did I get? Maybe at the dealer, they don't even know what they got was a 30 amp or 50 amp RV. So purchasing the right equipment for it, you have to know 30 amp versus 50 amp.
Yeah, so easiest way for a customer, for you as an RVer to know, is go out to your power cord and take a look at the power cord. So this cord here has 3 prongs on it. This is what's going to plug in to the outlet. Where you plug in, and this is a 30 amp. So a 30 amp only has 3 prongs, easiest way to remember. It's also substantially smaller. A 50 amp has 4 prongs. Okay. So you're gonna have, rather than 3, you're gonna have 4 here. And so you actually have 2 legs rather than just 1 leg of power.
Okay, so if somebody's wanting to know how to tell, the easiest way is just
I like easy.
Three prongs is 30 amp and 4 prongs is 50 amp. But
absolutely.
So let's dig into that a little bit more. On a 30 amp RV, you have one hot leg, 120 volt hot leg coming in. Then you have a ground and a neutral. And then on a 50 amp, the reason it has 4 prongs here is that you have 2 hot legs coming in, so that's 2 120 volt legs coming into your RV, and then you have the neutral and the ground, right?
Correct. Yep, that's 100% correct. So when you look at 30 amp versus 50 amp, it's not just 20 amps difference, right? It's actually more than that because of the 2 legs. And so on a 50 amp, you actually have leg 1 at 50 amps, and you have leg 2 at 50 amps. So a 50 amp RV actually is going to draw 100 amps power. Okay. So you're going to have 3 times the amount of power on a 50 amp versus a 30. And so that's why your power cord is going to be substantially larger. It's going to be bigger plugs. The breakers inside are going to be larger because of the current that can flow through that RV.
Okay, so there's a simple formula I like to point out. Maybe Tammy can put this on the screen right now. Can you do that?
I can do that.
Okay. It's back to sort of, I guess, 7th grade science, and it's volts times amps equals watts. So on the volt side, for that formula, we can always just assume it's 120 volts. Sure, you might be a little higher, a little lower than that, but for the purposes of this, let's just say it's 120. And then if you're in a 30 amp rig, so volts times amps, so it would be 120 times the 30 amp that your rig is, and that equals 3,600 watts, okay, of available power that you have to use. And so to Mike's point, if you take that same formula and you say, okay, now I'm in a 50 amp rig, so it's 120 volts, but it's 120 volts times 2, then times 50, and so that is actually 12,000 watts. So so to Mike's point, you're not just going from 30 to 50 amps and getting like 3,600 to maybe 6,000. You're going from 3,600 available watts in a 30 amp RV to 12,000 available watts in a 50 amp RV, and that's why 50 amps have 3 AC units a lot of times, and 30 amps only have 1.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you think about, the in terms of wattage, a lot of people can maybe relate to, like, they have a hair dryer, and it's got, like, I think yours has, like,
I know. I never cared how many watts my hair dryer was until we moved to an RV. It's like 1,800 watt RV. Are you crazy? You need to go get a hair dryer.
It's like a blowtorch, this thing, And so it says 1,800 watts on the side, and so now that means something to us as an RVer, and for you watching, if you're in an RV, it should mean something to you now, because if I'm in a 30 amp rig and I'm running that 1800 watt blow dryer, and I only have 3600 available watts.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
then you know
Not doing much more.
I got to think about, like, if I turn that microwave on, or I've got my AC unit on. So these are the considerations we have to make, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. On a 30 amp, it's very critical that you are aware of the loads you're running. And you know, I like the analogy of in the morning, right? I gotta have my coffee. I can't get going without coffee. So gotta run that coffee pot. You're gonna be running a shower. Hot water is being used. This time of year, down south, AC's running, right?
Yeah.
Well, here we have a problem, because with all of those loads, I can't run the microwave to make my breakfast.
Yeah.
I can't run the hair dryer when my wife gets out of the shower. So you have to be aware of the loads and be able to manage that.
But you don't use a hair dryer?
Not normally, not normally.
But maybe not the 1800 watt one, right?
Yeah, no. Normally just the exhaust fan in the bathroom works.
So I guess that answers the question of the difference in the 30 and 50 amp, and the considerations that you need to make depending on which RV you have.
So 30 amp RV always gets the 30 amp surge protector. 50 amp RV always gets the 50 amp. But what if we're 50 amp and we want to go plug into a 30 amp because we're at an older park that doesn't even have 50 amp yet?
Yeah, that's a great question, Tammy. So anytime you have a rig, such as your rig here, this Tiffin, it's a 50 amp rig. You always get the surge protector to match your RV. So get the surge guard to match. And so, you know, for you, it's going to be a 50 amp. And if you're in an older park or in a park that only has 30 amp access, you're going to go ahead and use an adapter.
Okay.
And so you can absolutely adapt in a pedestal with any of the surge guard products. So if I have a 50 amp and I'm going to plug into a 30, you're going to use a 50 amp to a 30 amp dog bone adapter. And so the way that would look is just like it is here. And
Okay.
then you plug this into that pedestal with your coach plugged in on the output side.
Okay. So if in a 50 amp rig, I've got two hot lines coming in, and I know that usually they'll split those on both sides of the RV, and that the manufacturer will appropriate certain receptacles for one side and certain AC units for the different sides. So if the 30 amp only has one hot leg, does that mean that whenever I adapt, that only one side of my RV gets lit up, or do both sides get lit up?
So that's where it's important you're using a quality adapter, such as the Southwire adapters. So if you're using a quality adapter, it's going to power both legs, and it's
Okay.
all going to be ran through the wiring and into the mold. And so if you end up using a cheaper, less expensive adapter, those can sometimes have problems where you don't get power on both legs. And so
Okay.
it's important, again, that you pay for a quality item when you're adapting. These are something that wear out over time, and you do want to make sure you keep them nice and clean. Don't let debris get on the plugs, and once they start wearing out, replace them.
So the hot leg from the 30 amp here
Yep.
gets split down here
Correct.
to these two, right?
Correct,
And that's how it can continue to go into the 50 amp.
Correct. And so your 50 amp RV is still getting power on both legs. However, you don't have 50 amps to run
no.
Well,
on
why
either
not?
leg.
Oh,
Why not?
I've lived through that one before.
So because you're adapted down to a 30 amp, all you can run is a total of 30 amps. If you draw more than 30 amps, you're going to have overcurrent draw. And
From the pedestal.
From the pedestal. And so that pedestal, that breaker on the pedestal should trip somewhere around 33 to 36 amps. And when that trips, that's a safety mechanism to prevent a thermal event. You do not want that breaker to be the reason why you keep disconnecting power. You need to manage your loads, and you need to be aware of what's going on. And that's where, you know, the surge guard units with the Bluetooth remote is key, because you can monitor your voltage and your amp draw real time inside your rig with a guaranteed 100-foot range.
Absolutely. I know when we're plugged into 30 amp, you sit there, you're watching it, and I'm like, okay, what all can I cook with tonight? What can I do? Turn the air off, turn the electric water heater off. What have I got? And we'll do tests on what we can run when we're just on 30 amps.
She's got all her kitchen gadgets, right? And they're all heat producing type items.
And we're all electric coach, so
Yeah.
I can't even pull propane out to use. So
But having the adapter, and we'll talk a little bit more about the adapter here in a second, or the monitor display that displays what we're talking about here, is it tells you how many volts you've got coming to your RV from the pedestal, and it tells you how many amps you're drawing, right? So
Correct.
if you're in a 30 amp rig, you don't need to be pulling more than 30 amps. So, so we can watch that. If we're on a pedestal and we're a 30 amp pedestal in our 50 amp RV, then we make sure that we keep it to an appropriate level. But is it safe for, say, somebody like me that's watching it? Because you said the breaker will trip at about what, 30?
Yeah, between 33 and 36, depending on how strong of a breaker it is.
So,
but when that trips, it's not because of a current threshold, it's because of a heat buildup.
Okay.
And so once it trips the first time, the next time it's going to trip even quicker, and the next one. And so the breaker will wear out over time. You do not want that breaker to be your safety mechanism. You want to be able to monitor and pay attention to your loads, especially when you're adapting. Again, going from a 50 amp rig, you're used to running 2 ACs, being able to cook, run the air fryer, coffee pot, no problem, right? On a 30 amp, when you adapt, you're going to be needing to make sure you manage your loads very carefully.
So just because you could get more amps, you shouldn't.
So I guess that's my question. So because to your point, the breaker will trip beyond 30 amps. So
but because
should I just run, and if I'm watching it, I know how many amps I'm pulling. Why can't I just continue to run 32 amps? That doesn't sound like something I should be doing though, right?
You shouldn't be doing that because the rigs are designed, your RVs are designed to only handle 30 amps. There's a safety mechanism there to where it's over-engineered, able to handle about a 10% more demand. However, you're building up heat, you're overloading, and so at your main load center inside your panel, the wiring, your adapter plug, you notice your 50 amp plug cord is much thicker than what your adapter cord is. And so you're putting a lot of stress on a part that's not designed to handle that amount of current.
Makes sense. So let's reverse this situation. Let's say I'm in a 30 amp rig.
Yeah.
And I've got my 30 amp surge guard unit here.
Yep.
But I only have availability to a 50 amp pedestal, so I can adapt there too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So you take a 30 amp to a 50 amp male adapter, and you plug in just like you did on the 50 amp to 30, but reverse and plug it right in. Now the thing to note is on a 30 amp rig, now you don't have the safety mechanism of that breaker tripping. And so if you overdraw and you get to 36, 38, 40 amps without a surge guard full electrical protection device, you are running the risk of having a thermal event because the wiring inside your coach, the wiring going to the pedestal, is not designed to handle that type of current. So your shore cord can't handle that current.
Okay.
Inside your rig, you do have a breaker. You have a 30 amp main breaker. Again, that breaker is not supposed to be put to the test as your safety mechanism for when you're adapting to 50 amp. It's a fail-safe, but they can malfunction. So on surge guard, one of the things we've done is on a 30 amp product, there's overcurrent protection. So if we see you drawing 20% demand, or 120% demand, sorry, which would be 36 amps, we're going to go ahead and shut you down and say overcurrent protection, because we don't want your RV to have a thermal event. We don't want your weekend away ruined because of all you could do was adapt to a 50 amp plug and you're overdrawing, just not being aware.
Okay. So I was getting all excited. I thought if I was in a 30 amp rig and could go to a 50 amp pedestal, I just had all the power I wanted, but that's not the case, right?
That's not the case, no. And so even though you plug into a 50 amp, you still need to be aware of your loads and monitoring your loads.
So let me see this here real quick. So, okay, so now let me think about this, because I've got 2 hot legs coming out of here, right? Mm-hmm. And then, but down here I've only got 1. So is one of these just a dummy plug and it's only pulling from one of these to come down here?
Yeah, so you're only having 1, so it's pulling off leg 1.
Okay, so if I I'm not going to do it because it's so well built, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. But if I wanted to cut this thing apart, one of these is not even connected to down here, right?
This wire here is a 3-conductor wire. So you have a leg 1, a neutral, and a ground.
Got it. Okay.
All insulated wiring there.
Okay, and what's that for?
That's an easy pull handle. So this is a patented technology that Southwire has, so that with all of our cords and adapters, you can plug into any pedestal and fold the handle flat.
Okay.
So you can still close the cover.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to bring that up because it seems like really necessary or whatever? But in my years of RVing, because I have used cords before that didn't have something like that, and you know, depending on the pedestal that you're at or how long it's been plugged in, you know,
have to get a little aggressive.
Yeah, having to grab this like this and try and pull it apart can sometimes be a mess. But having this, especially because the genius part of this is this, of course, has it too, right?
Yep.
So if I'm pulling this out of the pedestal, I can just place my hand on the pedestal and pull it out after I've turned the breaker off, of course.
Of course, yep.
And then they've got one on the back here, because a lot of times, if I'm staying somewhere for a long period of time and I have this in here, just like with anything, I mean, you leave something plugged in long enough, it might be a little more difficult to pull out. And so now I can have a plug on this end and this end, and I can pop them out very easily.
Instead of rocking them back and forth and loosening it all up and everything.
Absolutely. And one of the cool things with our products, you're going to notice on the full electrical protection units, they have an integrated receptacle inside rather than a plug head. And the reason why we did that is you get 50% more brass contact, which to normal everyday campers, you don't understand what that means. As we said earlier, these wear out over time. A plug head, because of how they're molded and the brass, they can only hold their shape for so long, and they become deformed and you get loose connections. Inside of a commercial grade receptacle, you don't have that problem any longer.
Okay.
And so longevity of the product is key, and that's why we offer that lifetime warranty and the connected equipment coverage, something you can't do if all you're doing is just a normal plug head.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because I've seen, and we're not here to talk about competitors, but I have seen other units on the market, or even plugs, that don't have molded. So that's interesting. I like that.
Absolutely.
All right. So why don't we move on to another topic?
Okay, a common thing you read about in social media groups is low voltage is what you need to worry about, low voltage in campgrounds. And coming from a house, you know, you don't ever stop to think about low voltage much, I guess. So the question is, what is the big deal about low voltage, and why are campgrounds so susceptible to it?
Yeah, great question. So let's start out by saying it's nothing that the campground's doing purposely wrong, inherently wrong. It actually goes back to the code. And so, you know, when you have a home, you have a subdivision, it's built to a code, it's built to a standard. And so there's a demand factor that every subdivision is built to. RV parks are held to that same demand factor. So when I build a RV park and I build an RV spot that has 10 campsites at it, I don't need to provide 100% demand to each location. Once I get to 10 spots, I only have to provide 50% demand in order to be code compliant. And so if, you know, those 10 spots are 50 amp RVs, we already talked 50 amp RVs actually draw 100 amps power. So instead of 10 campsites at 100 amps power, 1,000 total amps, I only have to have an infrastructure of 500 available amps. And so what happens is once you hit that threshold of amps, 500, your voltage of 120 is going to degrade. So it's going to decrease. And so when I get to a 550 amp, you're going to get lower voltage. When I get to 600 amps, I'm going to get even lower. And so campgrounds, as we all know, campgrounds are not at 50% capacity.
No, they certainly aren't.
They're at like 100% capacity.
Exactly.
Yeah. And big, you know, 100 amp hogs.
Yeah, and so it all goes back to the demand factor that our campgrounds are built to, just isn't adequate. And so again, campgrounds aren't doing anything inherently wrong. It's a code. And so as a infrastructure planner, as an investor of a campground, why would I, if the code says I only need to have 50% capacity, or if I end up getting 20 sites, I only need 40% capacity, why would I spend 2 or 3 times the cost to have 100% or 75% capacity? Right. And so that, coupled with a lot of the older parks originally only had 30 amp RVs. They have since upgraded, and even the great ones have upgraded. When they upgrade to 50 amp, they run new lines, they put in brand new pedestals. They don't just add a receptacle and a breaker and daisy chain. They actually go through and tear apart the campground, redo everything. The problem is if that transformer isn't upgraded at the same time, you're setting yourself up for a nightmare of a problem, because you're going from 30 amps to 100 amps demand at each spot potentially. And so the overload on the grid is a problem.
I feel like this is breaking news. I am blown away by the fact that the code says that they don't have to build their system to meet 100% demand, because every park we've gone to, well, not everyone,
but think about a gym. If you join a gym, they don't have to do it either. They don't have to be a...
No, they can sign 1,000 people up because they only know 50 people a day are going to show up.
It's the same concept.
But at an RV park,
you feel like if I pay you $35 for this site overnight, I should get all 100 amps that I want.
So
at my leisure.
And I will say that in all the places we've been, and we've been fortunate enough to have this RV in 49 states, it is the number one thing that we have experienced is low voltage.
Absolutely.
And I guess now I know why, right? Because the way that the parks are built, they're setting themselves up for failure from the beginning, and low voltage. Let's just get into that. Not why we have low voltage, but sort of why it's a problem. And the sensitive electronics in your RV are not designed to run on low voltage. And a lot of times, I'll hear somebody say, like on a social media group or something, of, I've been RVing for 50 years and never had a problem.
Yeah.
So my problem with that is, with low voltage, there's not an immediate cause and effect usually. You could run low voltage and things would run, but components, electronics that are run on low voltage for a period of time, it will reduce the life of those things. So then you wake up one morning and a piece of your electronics isn't working, and you just think, well, it just died. Could have been from low voltage easily, right?
Yep, absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. And let's talk about low voltage. What is low voltage? What is high voltage? So it's nothing that, Eric, you come up with, right? It's nothing I come up with Southwire. It's actually the NEC code, so North American Electric Code, dictates that low voltage is below 103 volts. So 102 and below is low voltage. High voltage is anything above 132. So 133 volts and higher is high voltage. And so that is a code that states what voltage is. It's not an arbitrary thing. And so low voltage, when you get outside that 102, 103 and below, you end up degrading the electronics over time. As you said, in the range of 95 to 102, you're not going to see instantaneous damage most of the time. It's going to just be harder on those components and degrade those electronics over time. When we look at your RV, whether it's this or your travel trailer, teardrop trailer, any of the RVs, our OEMs build quality products. And the components that we as suppliers provide those OEMs are built to be robust and last. And so when someone has a refrigerator that they have to replace 3 years in, or a new AC unit 5 years in, that shouldn't happen. Just like at your home, when you buy an appliance, that appliance is supposed to last time, right? So an air conditioner at home is supposed to last you 20 years, approximately, depending on where you live. Your RV is the same way.
Yeah.
That air conditioner should not be having to be replaced. If it's having to be replaced, more than likely, it was due to a voltage problem over time.
I mean, I feel like that people watching this that go to RV parks and have had, because a lot of people that we talk to, they've certainly had things in their RV to sort of go out on them and need to replace things, whether it's AC units or a microwave or refrigerator and things like this. So I know we're just talking about low voltage here, but there's a lot of things that can actually go wrong when you decide to plug your RV into a RV park pedestal, and there are things that you can do to protect yourself from these type things, and mainly these surge guards you're sitting in front of it. So why don't we just, if you would just walk us through what are the things that can happen at an RV park pedestal and how these help protect?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not just RV parks, but even at home. You put in a new pedestal at your house, you hire an electrician. An electrician who comes out to put in a 30 amp, they know, hey, this is a 30 amp, but inside a home, it's 240 volt. it's for that dryer. And so when they put that pedestal in, a lot of times they'll miswire that instead of 120 volts to 240 volts. And so that would fry your electronics in the RV very quickly if you plugged into that. That can happen at a park as well. You know, what else happens at a park is that pedestal, you know, that outlet here could have a loose connection.
Yep.
Could have reverse polarity, which is where, you know, your hot and neutral are flipped. And so reverse polarity in and of itself on a RV that hasn't been altered from the factory, there's not an inherent danger there.
Yeah.
But it's the appliances you plug in still could have power to them.
Got it.
It's other things that could happen, and so reverse polarity can be dangerous.
So what you're saying is on the reverse polarity, you're saying I could be plugged into a wall outlet that the neutral and the hot wire are swapped.
Yep.
And that appliance is off, but because it's reverse polarity, it could still be hot.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
that sounds dangerous.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
reverse polarity can be problematic.
Yeah.
You know, especially if we won't get into too much technical, but there's other things that could happen inside.
Sure.
If your RV is being serviced by a untrained RV technician.
Yeah.
Besides reverse polarity, something that's even more dangerous is going to be an open ground.
Okay. Let's talk about
So
that.
your open ground is your return path for voltage back to ground. So on an RV, RVs are built with metal. You have a metal chassis, you have metal on the outside of the RV, and if you don't have a return path for ground, you have the potential to be shocked when you touch something metal. And so an open ground condition, according to UL, you know, the underwriter laboratory code, you are not allowed to break ground. You can never disconnect the ground, okay? And so the reason for that is if I have stray voltage, which every electrical device known to man has leakage, normally in milliamps, that leakage goes to ground. But you can also have voltage due to, you know, a wire, the jacketing chafing through and touching hot skin. You could have a lot of variables there where you get leakage or voltage onto ground. And if you don't have that return path to ground, you go and touch something metal, you have what's called a hot skin condition.
Okay.
And that can be very hazardous.
So power, it has to go somewhere, right? I mean, it comes in, it performs its operation in your RV. But if you have excess voltage, more than what's needed to perform the functions in the RV, that excess voltage is what's going to ground. Is that right?
Well, so it could be, but you could also have just, you know, the what's called leakage, where you're having stray voltage off the electrical device going to ground.
But so excess voltage, if you don't have ground, it's going somewhere.
Yeah, it's staying on that metal platform because it can't escape.
Right.
And so without that ground, there's a problem.
So now it could, my whole RV's charged at that point.
It could be, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And we've had open ground in situations where they came and we just moved pedestals.
Well, that's a good point. If you get to an RV site and you did have an open ground condition, because Mike's going to talk a little bit about these surge guards, they will actually tell you if you have open ground, and we've had that. And
let someone know.
And we let somebody know, they move us to another site or get an electrician to come out and fix it immediately.
Yeah.
That's the solution. It's not, you don't plug into that.
Yeah, it's not don't use it.
Yeah.
Plug in anyway.
No, exactly. No, and the other thing that could happen is a open neutral condition.
Okay.
On a 30 amp, if you have an open neutral, you're just not going to have power. You're not going to get power into the coach. You need a neutral on a 30 amp. On a 50 amp rig, you know, it shares that neutral between leg 1 and leg 2. This is shared. And so if you lose this neutral, you end up creating a 240 volt loop where you get high voltage on one leg, low voltage on another, and it's going to damage your electronics pretty quickly in that rig. Just like on a 30 amp, if you plug that 30 amp into a 240 volt outlet, stuff would get damaged in your rig. Same thing with an open neutral on a 50 amp. So it's a big deal. And so besides that, and besides voltage, you know, you could potentially have a frequency problem. Not so much in the States or up in Canada. It's when you're operating off of one of those big industrial generators, you know, they put in for a rock concert type deal.
Or an RV show.
Or an RV show, yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it happens. And so frequency is the wave cycles. So AC voltage, which is what we're talking about when you plug in, is AC voltage, operates on a wave cycle. And so it's like a roller coaster. It goes up and down, up and down. And so in a second, you have 60 of those wave cycles. So it's 60 hertz, it's called. And so if you get outside of 10% of that, plus or minus 10%, you will end up having problems with your electronics. They won't run properly, and so, or it can damage them. And so we protect against that as well with our units. You know, from a feature standpoint, our products are very feature rich. You know, and that's why you guys love the product so much. Our unit, the best thing to do is get a full electrical protection device. And the reason for that is, not only are you protected from everything we just talked about, but you're also protected from surges and high and low voltage, which high and low voltage is the #1 issue out in campgrounds, as you guys can attest to.
So let me stop you there. When you said the things that would, so we talked about reverse polarity, open neutral, open ground. So you're saying that protects us against. So does that mean that it just fixes those problems? How does it protect me?
Yeah, so this is a computer inside here. And so this, when you plug it in, it's going to be analyzing the power source, what you're plugged into. And so it's a 10-second startup sequence. During that 10 seconds, if we see one of those problems, right on this screen, it will tell you what that problem is in plain English. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to look for a decoding book.
Right.
It tells you open neutral.
And it doesn't let the power through.
And it doesn't let power through. Yep.
And I love the plain language on there, because when we've had it before, you know, I know that I've seen units that have like codes on them, and you have to, you know, look up the code. But this just says like open ground.
Right.
And in an instant, you know what's going on. Okay, so it doesn't fix the problem. It just said that that's your job to say, hey, this just told me that's a problem. I need to contact the park and get them to address this.
Correct. So the way I like to do it is, when I come to a campground, before I back my rig in or pull my rig in or start the setup process, I grab my surge guard and I go to that pedestal, I plug it in, turn on that breaker, wait that 10 seconds to see everything, and it's going to tell me what my voltage is. It's going to tell me everything. And if I plug in and I already have low voltage or I already have a problem, don't pull your RV in there, please.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Go to the manager, get a different site. You do not want to take that power source.
Okay.
There's a reason why it's protecting you. It's not to aggravate you. It's to protect what you value most.
Right.
And so that's what Southwire is about, is protecting what you value most, which is hopefully you, your family, your pets, and one of your largest investments, which is your RV.
So, all right, it runs the 10-second analysis.
Yep.
And let's say everything's good. So I hear a little thunk in there, and that's
Tammy's happy in the RV.
Tammy's
the
happy.
Air conditioner starts coming on.
and it only takes 10 seconds, which is spectacular.
I know.
Yeah.
Because if it was any longer, then that can seem like forever.
It does.
But 10 seconds, that's nothing. And so then it gives me power. Now what's it doing?
Yeah, so now it's going to continue to monitor. Just because we engage power doesn't mean you're good forever. You know, some people have this misnomer, well, I don't want to spend that money because I can go out and test the pedestal with a voltmeter or a cheap display and see what's going on before I plug in. We're constantly monitoring from the time you plug in and apply power to the time you disconnect power and leave. And not just what you're plugged into here, but what you're connecting. So we sense on our 50 amp unit, we sense your rig. And if you have open neutral condition inside your rig, we sense that we disconnect power. Also,
inside the RV.
Yeah, going from the plug to inside the RV, that shared neutral. If you end up having a loose connection, it's a patented technology that Southwire has. We sense that, we disconnect power.
And is that the load side protection? Is that what we call that?
Yep, that's load side open neutral protection.
So line side protection is everything coming from the pedestal.
Yep.
Load side is inside the RV.
Correct.
Okay.
And then we also have one other awesome technology, which is elevated ground protection. And that's both on 50 amp and on our 30 amp unit. And if you have elevated ground where you get 30 volts or higher on ground, we sense that, we disconnect power. The reason why 30 volts is important is at 30 volts, hot skin condition, touch metal where you get shocked, 30 volts at 60 hertz, which is that frequency we talked about, that is where it becomes hazardous to human health.
Okay.
And can not just shock, but could electrocute you.
Okay.
You don't need 120 volts to electrocute.
No. So, okay. So we got that covered. Now the high and low voltage.
Yep.
This is gonna disconnect me, right?
Absolutely. So let's deal with low voltage first. You know, I'm in a park. Everyone, it's the afternoon, right? It's 4 o'clock. All the ACs. I got all 3 ACs on. And I'm at high demand, and I'm hovering right at 103. You dip down because it starts up the compressor. It ends up dipping down to 99 volts, and it comes back to 103 within an 8-second window. We're not going to disconnect.
Okay.
But if you stay in low voltage for over 8 seconds, we're going to disconnect power.
Yes.
When we automatically disconnect power, we're going to continue to watch. When power does come back to acceptable range, we will start a 128-second countdown. Once that 128 seconds is up and there hasn't been another issue during that time, we will automatically re-engage.
So it's not doing this on-off, on-off.
No.
That's great.
And so if it disconnects and it's been 5-10 minutes and this countdown timer goes down to 30, and then you look back and 2 minutes later it's back up to 96 seconds, it's because we keep seeing voltage dipping down a fault. And so we're not aggravating you on purpose. We're trying to protect, again, you and one of your largest investments. And the last thing we want is for us to let bad power into your rig, and not just, ruin your rig, but potentially cause you harm as well. And so, Southwire, we take great pride in our product. We offer the industry's best warranty, and that warranty with our product here is going to be not just a limited lifetime warranty, but a connected equipment coverage. And so connected equipment coverage means anything I plug in to here through my RV, if we ever let that bad power into your RV, and it not only takes out your AC, your refrigerator, your CPAP machine, your electronics that you guys have, right? All of that gets damaged. You're going to contact Southwire, and we're going to get your unit back. We're going to analyze it with electricians inside our lab. During that, if it's found that our unit did not protect what we say we protect against, you're going to provide us the receipts of everything that got damaged, and so Southwire will go ahead and cover that. And so that's what separates us from anyone else in the marketplace, is that guarantee protection, that no one else offers.
And I think that says a lot, because you're not going to offer that if you don't think your product can do it. That would just be stupid.
Absolutely.
You're not going to offer that.
And again, who is Southwire, right? Shame on me, I should have said this earlier. Southwire is one of the largest wire and cable manufacturers in North America. And so we are the industry leader in electrical protection as well. We are the only full electrical supplier who provides both OEMs, so your RV is built with Southwire product inside, and also providing full electrical protection in the aftermarket.
The warranty is madness. Like, really. I mean, it's like I can't think of any other company and any other product that has a warranty like that.
Yeah.
So that doesn't do what it was intended to do.
Yep.
Something in my RV gets damaged because it didn't do what it was intended to do. You're going to write me a check.
Yep. So there's obviously all that fine print and everything.
Of course, yeah.
But in layman's terms, yes. So what's going to happen is we're going to, again, you're going to call us. We want to work with you directly. Don't go back to your dealer. Don't go to bother you two,
Right.
Contact Southwire. We're going to do an investigation on what happens. We do ask that you hold on to all that damaged product. Don't just discard it. And so we get the unit back. We take a look. Sure enough, we had a manufacturing defect, or it didn't function the way it was supposed to. We go ahead and work with you and get that covered.
And it is TechnoRV. I can say that in dealing with y'all for a lot of years that I can't ever think of a time that y'all haven't done what y'all said y'all were going to do. Whether it be a warranty situation or taking care of a customer in a certain way. So that's important to us because we're all about customer service.
Absolutely.
And we only partner with companies that we feel share those same values. So sorry for interrupting. The easiest job in the world is working for a privately held, family-owned still company that values their customers.
just like TechnoRV does.
Oh, I thought you were talking about it. I was like, well, thank you, Mike.
Southwire values our customers, and so we want customer satisfaction number one, and we believe we have the very best product in the marketplace to protect your RV and protect what you value most.
I know y'all have the best.
Yep, I was about to say.
Thank you for that.
I know that 100%. I've got another question, but did you have one first, or?
I did, but you can go.
You sure?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, we haven't really talked about surges themselves. Okay?
Yeah.
We've gone through wiring issues, high and low voltage, but of course, the idea that you could get a surge in your RV is still there. What's this do? How does it do it? How do you get protected here?
Yeah, so whether you're talking full electrical protection, surge protection, or you're talking surge protection that you have for your TV, you just went Best Buy and you bought yourself that brand new 75-inch TV, right?
You put it in here, right?
Yeah, put it in here, absolutely, absolutely. And with that, Best Buy got you ended up buying a surge strip for that TV, right? The way all surge protection works is that we use MOVs. They're called metal oxidized varistors. And the way those work is a surge is high energy in a very short duration. And when I say short duration, I'm not talking seconds. I'm talking milliseconds, microseconds. And so that high energy, that high voltage that comes through, in a very short duration. And those MOVs, what they do is they clamp down. And so they suck out that excess voltage, okay, that excess power. And so every time they suck out that power, they give up a little bit of their life. Okay. When they're at the end of their life, they die. And the way they die are they blow out. And so they blow out in two different ways typically. One is either out the bottom closest to the circuit board, or two, they'll crack around the top and blow open, kind of like butterfly wings. And I like electricity, I like stuff like that, and I find it pretty cool seeing that. But the way our surge protection works is it's a multi-stage surge protection. What that means is we're not just stacking them vertically in a line, right, where one's getting hit all the time. We also do in series. So they're in series and in parallel.
Okay.
And so it's a multi-stage surge suppression technology. And our units are designed to withstand 100 6,000 volt surges without loss of function and feature.
That sounds like a lot.
That's why ours
So-
never got
Exactly. UL, we've been doing electrical protection for, since the 90s. And so in electrical protection, UL tests it for 25 6,000 volt surges. And in those 25, if I have a unit that has LED lights, I have a screen, I have anything, you cannot fail. You can't have a light blowout. You can't have
25 times.
just 25 times. Our products work 100 6,000 volt surges without loss of function, feature, any damage to the unit.
Is that, and I'm asking because I don't know, is that would that be an industry-leading number?
It would be, yes. So
I figured. 100 sounds like a lot.
We test everything we do to make sure we're the leader in the industry, because you don't become the most trusted electrical safety supplier to the OEMs by putting out marginal product.
Okay. So I get a surge.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big one, but it's not one and done. You just keep using it, right?
Correct, and that's a misnomer that's out there. Is people think I have a surge protector, one time it's hit, I'm toast.
Right.
Now there are what's called acts of God, a direct lightning strike or massive things that could happen where it takes out in one shot. But
everything it's going to blow my tires off the ground too, right?
Exactly. I mean, there's going to be a lot more damage than that, right? And so our units are designed to withstand hundreds of surges without any issue.
Okay.
And so a surge comes through, you're not going to know it unless you don't have a surge strip, a surge guard connected to that device, because it's going to damage that electronics. I live in Florida, and in Florida, I've had more electrical problems in the past 6 months than I have had my whole life in Indiana.
Yeah.
And so, I'm a firm believer in electrical protection, not just for RVs, but for homes and everything, because, it's crazy that we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on things, and we let a couple $100 dictate how much risk we want, right?
Yeah.
And so a full electrical protection device is going to provide comprehensive electrical protection. Whereas, you walk into a store or see online, go to Techno's site and you pull up another surge protector, another surge guard unit, but it's a third of the cost.
Yeah.
The reason it's a third of the cost is it doesn't have a computer inside. It doesn't provide full electrical protection. It has indicators on there, but it does have that surge strip still built for that whole RV, right?
Yeah.
And so that there is a misnomer that all electrical protection is the same. It's not all the same by any means. And so really understand what you have and why Surge Guard is the best to have.
So I'm not done with these surges yet. I want to talk about them
Absolutely.
a little
Sorry.
bit more.
I'm all over the
Letting you
place.
go.
So all right, we've got these mobs, and,
Yep.
and they're taking hits, and so if I take a hit this big versus a hit this big, let's say, like this one might knock out a half a mob, but if it's a bigger one, it potentially could knock out just a couple of mobs in there, right? I mean, it's depending on the rating of the mobs and how big the spike is, right? So, and if I took direct hit, it could just blow out all the mobs.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And remember, over time they degrade, right? Because they give up a little bit of their life every time they get hit. And so, go on.
So
It's like a bank account. You take a withdrawal every time there's some type of surge.
I love that analogy. That's great.
we can just wrap things up right there.
Yep.
There you go. Thank you.
So
While you're talking.
okay, so now and by the way, we've full-time RVing for 6 years, so this means for us that, and we are typically on shore power, that means 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, we are plugged in, and we personally have never
Had one
expired all the mobs in our unit. You know, I'm not saying it can't happen, because obviously it can happen, but I would say that it's not as common as some may think. It does depend on where you're at in the country, I guess, but you know, again, I'm back to the low voltage is the thing that we experience more than anything. But all right, so let's get back to this. So let's say I expend all my mobs, and then what happens? The red light comes on, and then is this? I just send it back to y'all, and y'all repair it, or what do we do from there?
Yeah. So when a mob, when all the surge protection is used up, it's depleted. That excess energy, it doesn't magically. Oh, the MOV no longer is there, it no longer works, and so now surges just magically disappear. No, that excess energy that took out that MOV is still going to be somewhere in the device or downstream now, and it's going to cause damage. And so inside the unit, you have MOVs, but you also have circuit boards that have traces on them, which are basically wires integrated into the board, right? You have the processor, and you have contactor, which has coils. And so when I blow out those MOVs, that surge is still there, and it has to go someplace. So it's going to go to the next closest thing and damage that. And so in our units, you know, we've been doing this since the 90s. We've been doing electrical protection since the 90s. And being a leader in the OEM space with our electrical protection built in, integrated into RVs, we have seen where someone's taken surges and they've taken damage, and the board on the unit we could replace, you know, and I get the board back and I change out the board for the customer, only to find out that, you know, their rig, when they power it up, it works for another month and a half, and then all of a sudden the coil gave out prematurely. Well, why did that coil, that contactor is designed to withstand 10,000 disconnects before the end of its life. And in, you know, these types of circumstances, what happens is that surge went through and damaged, weakened that coil potentially. In addition to that, it could blow out the processor. So when you exhaust surge protection, our 30 years in this industry has taught us you need to change out.
Buy another one.
Buy another one. It's a cheap investment. Again, when I'm talking about this, I don't want anyone to think several $100s is cheap. It's not cheap.
Sure.
It's an investment. But compared to your RV, even your $10,000, $15,000 investment of a travel trailer to a hundreds of thousands of dollars for a Class A diesel pusher, this is a small investment, and it did its job as it's designed. Get a new one.
And of course, I knew that before I asked the question, but I still wanted them to talk about it. But and I agree with that 100%. It's like, hey, it is an investment to buy one of these, but if it took that hit, it did its job to protect your RV. It's time to go get another one. So But just to clarify on the MOVs thing,
Yeah.
if and I know that Surge Guard doesn't replace those or anything like that, but that's because if you take that surge and you, let's say you did replace the MOVs, there is likely or could be damage past that into the circuit board. So now if you did replace that, it would be like, well, but now the circuit board may not identify open neutral anymore. I mean, who knows what it could be, right?
Yeah, there can be potential damage inside the unit elsewhere. And the last thing Southwire wants, as
Right.
being an industry leader, not just in the RV space, but in the electrical space, last thing we want is to attach our name to an inferior product
Right.
in an inferior situation. And so we do not want to run the risk of having you or having us swap out broken components only to have you still aggravated because a unit failed prematurely down the road. We want satisfied customers for the lifetime.
Sure.
I mean, that's how you become the industry leader in wire and cable
Yeah.
and in electrical components.
Well, I mean, again, for us, we've been 6 years. We've never had to replace ours. you
Yeah.
know? I mean, we've changed model years and different things like that as time goes on, just because we're TechnoRV and we like to test the newest models and all that.
But 365 days a year, 24 hours a day.
You know,
Yeah.
in
Pretty much.
49 states. I mean, we've been in it all. All right, so I know these units are well made.
Yeah.
And so we do get asked the question sometimes just about are they weatherproof, waterproof? Like, what's the rating on these? Like, what can you and can't you do as it relates to weather?
Yeah, so weather, again, we've been doing electrical safety for 30 plus years. We do not just RV, but we do GFCIs, ELCIs, and so we know how to make a weatherproof unit. And so with our units, they're designed to be weatherproof, weather resistant, okay? And what that means is that the unit can plug into a pedestal all day long, 365 days a year without a blink of an eye. What we don't want you doing is submerging the unit, okay? And so if I'm at a low pedestal, I'm not just going to hang it and have it touch the ground.
Right.
I'm going to put a block up underneath it to get it up off the ground. And the reason for that is if you have it on the ground, water is going to pool during a heavy rain.
Yep.
We want to make sure water doesn't pool, because if water pools, it can penetrate the gaskets, just like it can on your pressure washer machine.
Yeah.
Okay? And so our units are designed to not let water moisture in.
Got it.
What if we did let water in?
Yep.
Guess what? Our lifetime warranty, limited lifetime warranty and connected equipment coverage covers moisture penetration.
Okay.
So if 5 years down the road you get moisture back behind the screen or inside the unit, you hear a swish swash of water,
That's covered.
it's covered as long as you didn't submerge the unit.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And I just wanted to point out, and I may have already mentioned this, but we're hooked up 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Rain, sleet, snow, sandstorms, windstorms, like just everything.
We've been in a hurricane.
We've been in a hurricane, and
Wow.
we've never had any issues with water penetration on these units. But we do get asked the question, so I'm glad we were able to discuss that.
But you do put yours up on the little slinky, even if some of these pedestals are so low to the ground, even when the weather's good, if we get to a low pedestal,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
always put it up off the ground.
So
You don't wait for the storm or the event to happen. You're just like, it's too low, I'm gonna put it up.
If it's a low pedestal, I'll just go ahead and put it up. And I do use one of those sewer hose slinkies, because they've kind of got this graduated sloping thing going on, so that if I'm on a low pedestal, even if it's bending like that, that slinky, it's graduated from high to low, so it can really just cradle that thing in there. I mean, a block would work
Yeah.
too, but I found that slinky. What is that? What is this thing?
Oh, that's our integrated lock ring. So
Okay.
this is designed to keep honest people honest,
Okay.
and make it so it doesn't get legs and walk away on it,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And so all you do is you take your bike lock, chain lock, tie it to a pedestal, and it makes it so that this isn't going to get legs and walk away on you.
Okay, so that's another question we get asked. People are concerned about, is there theft? I don't think there's this widespread theft issue of people coming and taking these off of pedestals, but in the history of mankind, I'm sure it's happened a few times. But what I don't believe has ever happened, that is if somebody has used the locking ring and had a cable lock wrapped around the pedestal like we do, I would find it highly unlikely that a would-be thief would spend the time to try and deal with that one as opposed to just moving on to somebody else who doesn't have it locked up.
Correct, and that's what we've seen.
Don't
you know?
be an easy target.
Exactly. Inside our RV parks, right? We're a community, and we're watching out for our neighbors, and so you know if you see someone wandering between trailers back by the back, you're kind of curious as to what goes on.
Oh yeah,
and so
sure.
you know, this again is a deterrent. If someone wanted it, they'd cut the cable off,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Just like if someone wanted inside your RV, they'd break the window out.
Right.
Right.
It's a theft deterrent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So okay, that makes plenty of sense there. So now all right. We've got the LCD display on these units, and it gives me,
Absolutely.
it tells me how many volts I've got per line. It tells me how many amps I'm pulling per line. If I have any faults, it's going to show up on here. For open, neutral, reverse polarity, low voltage, it's going to all show up out here. So my concern with that is that you know, I wake up in the morning time and walking around the RV in my underwear, and
Nice visual there.
and something happens. Like I don't want to go strolling outside to see what happened. So what's the solution? I shouldn't have to go out here and look at this to see what's going on.
Well, as your neighbor, I want to make sure you don't go out there, okay? And so that's why Southwire has our remote, okay? So our units are 34931, which is a 30 amp, and the 34951 are Bluetooth certified. And so we're the only one in the marketplace that has a Bluetooth certified full electrical protection device, okay? And what that means is we went through the added steps and added efforts to have Bluetooth independently test our protocol.
Probably added expense too.
Absolutely, absolutely. But we don't cut corners inside Southwire.
Right.
And so we came out with our Bluetooth certified remote. So on the remote, you'll be able to see your voltage on each leg, your amp draw, your frequency, and your kilowatts being used real time. It also tells you your fault log as well. So you can see, you know, the unit I have here tells you high and low voltage, why that we've been disconnected from our surge guard unit. And so this Bluetooth remote, we guarantee 100-foot range.
Okay.
Reason why that's important is if all I had was my phone app, guess what I'm dependent on at that point? The hardware inside my phone. And so depending on the phone, depends on the range. There are some phones you get 20-foot range. There are other phones you get 55 feet Bluetooth range. This is guaranteed for 100-foot range.
Got it.
And so that's why we came out with our remote first before coming out with the app. And so we wanted to make sure that we checked all the boxes, dotted all the I's, because we don't want to cut corners. We don't want you to be frustrated when you're in the front of your rig and your power pedestal is back outside of your range of your phone. We want to make sure you can see.
Right.
Just like I can take this off the bracket that's on the back and I can bring it outside. I can carry it around with me. 100-foot range is a guarantee. You know, I've seen it work 200 feet, 250 feet away without a problem.
So I love the wireless monitor, and the place that I normally sit in the RV, I just have it right here, so I can just reach over. 30 amps. Tammy, turn that hairdryer off. So I love having the information inside, and I think most customers do too. Okay, so let's move on. What's your next question?
Oh, okay. So I have been talking to customers before and them asking questions, and they will say, oh, but especially somebody that at like the Tampa show or the Hershey show, they come up, they just bought a new RV, they're so excited, and they're like, they told me it's got full surge protection in it, I don't need this. So just explain what that means, an RV coming from the manufacturer with surge protection, what that could mean.
Yeah,
Yes.
do they all just have that, or do they not?
No, so great question, and it is something we get quite a lot, right? And so being the industry leader in electrical protection, being the industry leader in transfer switches, especially for the RVs, you know, we actually have one here, a transfer switch from Southwire. Our transfer switches will say Southwire, or they'll say Surge Guard. Surge Guard is the brand of our transfer switch. It doesn't mean you have full electrical protection, okay? And so you really need to know what your part number is. And so on our units, they all have a model number right here on the label. And so on the unit, you need to understand that. And you can go to our website and see what protection you have inside your rig. But depending on the manufacturer, if they have a full electrical protection, That's typically going to be the 40450 for a 50 amp, 40350 for a 30 amp, or a 40350 for a 50 amp. We have a lot of them.
So,
those are full electrical protection built into the rig.
So if you had to say, take everything from pop-up campers all the way up to the $2-3 million RVs, what percentage of, as a whole, of all the RVs being sold would you say actually come with full protection?
Yeah, so you're under 10% of all RVs have even surge protection. So again, as we've talked about, there's a difference in levels of protection. There's full electrical protection, which are these, or the transfer switch that has that full. There's also what's called surge protection, or electrical protection, that is very limited in what it does.
Right.
And so that surge protection, those surge only devices that are $100, $150, $200, you know, kind of that under $200 threshold, those are a surge only with wiring diagnostics. And so it's a surge strip for your RV.
Yeah.
There are some transfer switches and some hardwired units that are the same thing, integrated into the RV, where it's a surge strip for the RV. Full electrical protection is really what every RV needs, because again, even that $5,000 pop-up camper still has electronics, and you're plugging things into your rig.
Right.
And all it takes, if you have one AC, you need to protect it from low voltage.
Yeah.
You need to protect the unit. If inside your RV, you know, it's a temp pop-up where literally there's no electronics, or it's all DC powered, then obviously you don't need one. But
Right.
other than that, you need to make sure you have full electrical
If you're
protection.
plugging into something, you need it.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Okay, so that kind of answered my question, but there are other types of surge protectors that are built in or hardwired into RVs, and maybe that could be what they're talking about.
Aftermarket stuff. You
Yes,
mean aftermarket
yes.
stuff.
Aftermarket and OE, actually. So in order to be an OEM, it has to be a UL listed product, a
Okay.
UL listed. And so really there's only a couple of us who manufacture a hardwired unit to that level. You know, you guys carry our 35550
Yes.
for 50 amp and 35530 for
Yes.
30 amp. Those two units are hardwired full electrical protection units inside the RV as well. They have optional remote panels for that unit, and I highly recommend anyone who does a hardwired unit, definitely spend the money for the remote kit. You need to see what's going on inside your unit. And again, you get full electrical protection. With our unit, you still get that limited lifetime warranty and that connected equipment coverage that you won't get with anyone else's. So again, yes, hardwired units is another form of full electrical protection that they could have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we're about done, and you know, I knew a good deal about this, but I learned a lot today too.
Yeah.
And so
It's always good to talk to the experts.
yes, it's all that excellent point there. And so I did just want to point out that, you know, all the surge guard stuff, you can find it at our website at TechnoRV.com, and we are happy to answer more questions if you have them. We have a very educated staff and customer support. Well, it's just kind of our thing. And so feel free to go to our website for more information there. And I just wanted to say thanks to Mike Conway for coming out.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. Again, we love the partnership with TechnoRV, and your education piece, again, you guys do a phenomenal job helping us as an industry be able to educate anyone who's new and enjoying this wonderful lifestyle.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks for checking us out, and we'll see you down the road.